I've now spent close to 1,000 days transcribing drum beats. But how did that start? Well, back when I got my first drum machine, I didn't get the results I wanted. It didn't sound anything like the music I wanted to make. So I thought if I want to learn how to do something properly, I have to study it. So I set myself a 30-day challenge. Every day, I'd work for at least half an hour on figuring out a drum pattern of one of my favorite songs. That was both fun and really hard work. And by the end of that month, I had learned so many things I could apply to my own creations. Since I didn't want that to stop, this has been going on for a few years now. In this video, I want to tell you a few of the things I learned in the process. Hello everyone, this is... First off, you will learn as you go, and you will also start to hear things differently as you get more practice. Whenever I open up transcriptions that I made as a beginner, I often find errors, or even entire instruments I missed the first time around, which are so obvious to me now, but back then I was dead convinced I got it right. But don't let that discourage you. You have to start somewhere. Although it can take an awful lot of time, transcribing drum patterns is worth its while. With nearly every drum pattern you will learn something new. Sometimes you'll run into problems when recreating beats. For example, the hi-hats in Stevie Wonder's Part-Time Lover that don't fit into the regular 4/4 grid you've been using up to that point. What the? But each of these problems can lead to new insights. I learned a lot about music theory, composition, sound design, and production in the process, like EQing sounds so they don't get in each other's way. Or little tricks like delaying the snare by a few milliseconds so it doesn't clash with the kick. Of course, some of these things are pretty obvious once you think about them. For instance, that you can make beats tighter, simply by cutting the long ringing sounds short. It's the same principle as with gated reverb. The long reverb tail, which would otherwise muddy up the mix, is simply cut off. If you want to translate that to samples, then this is pretty easy to achieve by just shortening the hold and decay. Listen to the cymbal in New Order's Blue Monday. It doesn't ring out completely, but it's cut short. Makes it sound a bit like a whooping cough though, or an asthmatic dog. Instead of changing the sample length, you could also make use of the hi-hat choke group and stop long open hats by placing closed hats. Listen how the closed hats clean up this beat. This staccato effect makes room for the kick drum and it sounds more aggressive. Rhythms are made from small building blocks. These keep reappearing everywhere, even across instruments and genres, whether it's the omnipresent 4-on-the-floor disco rhythm or for instance this pattern, which we already encountered on the 909 Rimshot in Jeff Mills' Exhibitionist mix, or on the cowbell in Dida. Or this hi-hat pattern. You can find it in Aphex Twin's Crystal. As well as several Eurodance songs from the 90s.
This is the rhythm of the night.
A lot of electronic dance music is built around the same patterns. In our Every Eurodance Song Ever video, we show you a few of these building blocks. And each time we mix up the hi-hats a bit, we get a new Eurodance song. I see it this way. Music is a language, and if you want to learn how to speak, you should also pay attention to the words that make up the sentences. Continuous rapid-fire 16th notes, like a repetitive hi-hat, tambourine or shaker, can sound very monotonous and straining to the ear. That's why they often have some kind of variation applied to them. This could simply mean alternating between accented and unaccented steps, like in Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F. But this variation can go way beyond accents. Take a look at our video on humanizing hi-hats to learn more easy variation techniques. Another quick fix is to add a modulation effect like a phaser, which brings in plenty of variation and sonic interest. When trying to identify rhythms, don't just immediately resort to trial and error. Instead, try to envision what the beat looks like on the grid, or what it would sound like if you moved a step to a different position. If you feel overwhelmed, then pick out one or two of the more obvious elements first. The kick and snare often are good candidates. And once this foundation is in place, it will become easier for you to hear the rest of the elements because you already have some points of reference. It absolutely doesn't matter if you get it right the first time, but if you make placing the steps a conscious decision, then you actually condition your brain to think inside of the 16-step grid, instead of just practicing trial and error. Admittedly, when starting out, you have to train yourself to really listen for the less obvious drum and percussion elements. Often they're a backbone for the other instruments, not front and center. More like a flavor you have to add to your palate first, before recognizing them in the mix. Sad but true, nearly every song is in 4/4 and fits into the standard 16-step grid of a drum machine. It's shocking how rarely you have to resort to tempo multipliers or pattern lengths that are not multiples of 16. The more complex a pattern gets, the more you have to slow it down to actually hear what's going on. With some Aphex Twin songs, for example, I'd say it's impossible to accurately figure them out on normal speed. But once you analyze how it's done, you will also learn to recognize certain patterns. And in time, this will allow you to hear them even without slowing down. Now, in the back of your mind, there may be a voice saying that's a bit like cheating. But in quite a few interviews with accomplished guitarists or drummers, you'll hear that this is exactly how they learned their trade. They slowed down the vinyl records to figure out what was going on. You don't have to overdo it. Sometimes a minimal drum pattern is all a song needs. Good examples for this are Radiohead's Everything in Its Right Place, where the kick is basically a steady pulse that goes on for the entire song like a metronome. Or Massive Attack's Teardrop. Or Night Call by Kavinsky. If it works for the song, don't overcomplicate it. We all tend to stay in our comfort zone. In this case, this means sticking to songs you already know, or picking patterns from music genres you listen to anyway. But when I started transcribing drum patterns for our patrons, I had to leave that comfort zone. No more cherry-picking the easy patterns. And what can I say? I think I've actually learned the most from those patterns. Also in regard to production techniques. And in the process, I got to know a lot of great songs which I wouldn't have found otherwise. Some of which we even played as end jams to our videos. So, try to broaden your horizon by leaving your comfort zone. As always, a big thank you to all of our patrons, especially Tomas, who introduced us to Yellow Magic Orchestra.
bunny.